Can you recall the last time you were captivated by nature? Was it the majestic view of a snowy mountain range? Or was it the smell of a refreshing sea breeze with a soft sandy beach under your feet? But now imagine if that's not the experience that nature gives, where instead what you get is the overwhelming smell of a rotten egg. Now your feet are stuck deep into mud. You're surrounded by weird growing trees with its dense, exposed roots that are both unwelcoming and inaccessible. So, would you still be captivated? Ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what it feels like being in a mangrove forest. It smells, it's dirty, inaccessible, and sometimes creepy. If you think about it, it sounds like a place where evil witches would go to hang out, right? Which is probably the reason why mangroves are being destroyed at a rate 2 times faster than any terrestrial forest on Earth, being seen as nothing more but a wasteland. They were converted into other land use with potentially higher economic value. But now, as more research began to focus on understanding the ecological significance of mangroves, we also begin to see the true beauty of mangroves through the lens of science, which is the beauty of a home to the migratory birds that seek refuge and rest during rough weather. Even the small juvenile fish, they seek protection in its dense root system underwater, while the muddy ground during low tide is a social site for male crabs to mingle with the ladies, because even crabs need romance, apparently. But you see, mangrove is not just a home. It is a home with storage capability. You see, in a mangrove, the smell is actually a sign of decaying organic matter in a low oxygen environment. But because it is such a slow process, it would eventually just piles up throughout the years, along with all its natural carbon materials, hence reducing the amount of CO2 being released out into the environment, a crucial natural process that's helping us to fight against climate change. But the services provided by mangrove is not just limited to those who live within, but also beyond, which is why we're seeing a lot of coastal communities relying on them for the source of culture as well as livelihood, contributing greatly towards their social, economy, and even environment. Ladies and gentlemen, working with nature made me realize that the beauty of mangroves cannot be seen like how we see each other, how we look, how we smell, appearance, this and that. The beauty of mangroves can only be measured by how much life that lives within it. It sustains, it protects, provides, and secures. A beauty that can only be seen beyond our biased human senses. Thank you.
Hi, Atteleth, again. Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation. Can you tell me a bit about how you do your research, and do you get to visit these mangrove forests? Do you take samples? What is the kind of research that you're doing?
Well, actually, during my master degree, which is just graduated last year, I studied on the dispersal of mangrove propagules and seeing how does as mangrove propagule and how could it naturally disperse and establish into newer ground. And from what the experience basically being in a mangrove, it's exactly how I've presented. Because every mangrove have a different kind of environment. Some mangroves have no mosquitoes, whereas some mangrove have a lot of mosquitoes. And most of the time when we talk about being in a mangrove, the pleasant part is being in a boat on a cruise along the river. But no one have actually have the hands-on experience, like enjoy the experience of being in the ground, in the mud, knee deep, and picking up samples of core samples, could even be propagule sample, this and that. So most of my research focus on combining those dispersal element as well as hydrological cycle as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I have a question for you, Athlete. I know that mangroves are very important in climate change because of their ability to capture CO2. And my question is, from your point of view, how are they being managed? What is being done to preserve these mangroves forests and to preserve them, how to keep them alive so that they can help us in a climate change fight?
Well, actually, that's a lot of work being done, and it's not just mangrove, because mangrove itself is just part of a bigger ecosystem, which is part of a wetland itself. in a wetland, there's mangrove, that's peatlands, there's shrubs, this and that, right? But in terms of how the work and that we can do is basically we have to firstly differentiate between conservation and forest management. Conservation basically keeping mangroves in that particular area with specific special habitat or animal as it is. Whereas forest management basically balance out the need for local, basically for the local economy and in terms of continuous of the forest management throughout the future, because there are some areas where there's heavy reliance of the community towards the forest, right? So we can't ignore that. It'd be insensitive to do that. But also at the same time, how do we balance between harvesting those resources at the same time making sure that those resources could sustain throughout the year or in the future? So of course, those are the things that to me I would really focus on, whether differentiated with conservation and proper forest management. Depend on areas that we want to work on, I would say.
Thank you very much. Very important topic. Thanks.
And just a quick question. So I loved your use of narrative and the way you brought us in at the start. And I just want to ask you, what do you feel is the most important thing to communicate to the public? Do you think it is the beauty of nature or the understanding of nature or something else?
The reason why I talk about beauty in the first place is because when it comes to ecosystem, we always talk about, corals being colorful, the beach being refreshing, this and that. But when it comes to mangrove, of course, we enjoy the boat cruise throughout the river. It's not something that we're gonna update in a picture in our two-piece, right? Being in a knee-deep mud and so on. But the reason why I would say that is because sometimes nature is not defined by how we see beauty, right? Nature is not defined by the smell. It doesn't matter whether it's smell. It doesn't matter whether it's unpleasant to us. What matters is for it to continue to sustain those life and plant and animal that relies on that ecosystem. A complex ecosystem where everyone function in a balanced way and continue perform all the ecological function like coastal protection as well as some of the carbon storage and so on. So all of the things are not necessarily pleasant to us, but it's a necessary process, which means it goes beyond what is beauty and what is pleasant, basically.
Fantastic.